Have you ever reached a point in life where you felt like your children no longer respected you? I've been through that painful phase. My name is Richard, and I am 70 years old. Like many fathers out there, I used to believe that as long as I lived for my children, sacrificed for them, put their needs before my own, they would always love and respect me. But one day, I realized everything had changed. I didn't feel like the father they used to admire. I felt like an outsider, an annoying old man trying to relive the past just to feel like he still mattered. And it didn't stop there. Whenever I offered suggestions, they brushed them off. When I tried to give advice, they laughed it off or gave me a patronizing smile. There were times I wanted to raise my voice, to remind them of all the years I worked hard to raise them, all the sacrifices I made, but then I stayed quiet. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't want to cause tension in the family. And the more I stayed silent, the more I withdrew from them. I know there are many of you out there, parents, grandparents, who are in the same situation. Your children are grown now, they're busy, they're more distant. And even though you still love them just as much as you always have, the connection feels weaker, like it's slowly fading over time. And the most painful part isn't the silence. It's the feeling of being overlooked, of being treated like you no longer matter. So what should we do in times like this? Many people respond with anger. I did too. But I learned getting angry doesn't solve anything. In fact, it pushes our children even further away. The only thing that truly works is changing the way we respond. And that's the key. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, I hope you'll stay with me, because I want to share not just the pain, but also the journey of transformation. Small, simple actions that helped me regain the respect I had lost from the very children who once made me feel invisible. In this video, I'll walk you through 6 things I did in my everyday life that helped bring that respect back. I'm sharing them with you, not as advice from an expert, but as a fellow parent who's been there. These 6 habits truly worked for me, and I believe they can work for you too. Action 1. Stop chasing your children's approval. After months of trying to do everything to please my kids, I began to realize the more I tried, the more distant they became. I was always the one calling first. I once canceled a golf game just because my son said he might drop by. But then he messaged at the last minute to say he was too busy. I cooked his favorite meals, sat at the table and waited. And sometimes they didn't even show up. I kept thinking, if I just try a little harder, maybe they'll appreciate me more. But no, they didn't appreciate it. They simply saw it as something expected, something automatic. Then, one morning, I stood in front of the mirror. I looked at this older man with wrinkles, but also with dignity still in his eyes, and I asked myself, Richard, when will this man start living for himself? That morning, I made a decision. I stopped trying to earn their approval. I started saying no when I felt tired. I no longer asked, "Do you need anything from Dad?" every time they came by. And strangely enough, I felt lighter. My daughter started asking, "Dad, what are you up to these days?" She began to take interest. One time, when I told her I couldn't babysit because I had plans to go fishing with a friend, she said, "Wow, I didn't know you had so many plans." I just smiled. But deep down, I knew, bit by bit, she was starting to see me differently. It turns out, trying too hard to please your children can backfire. Constantly sacrificing yourself sends a message that your feelings don't matter, and that makes it easier for them to take you for granted. Action 2. Don't argue. Lead by example. In the past, I used to react. Every time my kids said something I didn't agree with, I reminded them of all I'd done. I'd get frustrated and say, "After everything I've done for you, you talk to me like this?" But that only made things worse. It turned every conversation into a battlefield. Then one day, I came across a quote that stopped me in my tracks. "You can't teach people to respect you with words. You do it by how you live." That hit me hard. From then on, I stopped trying to win arguments. Instead, I focused on living in a way that reflected my values. When my kids said something out of line, I didn't snap back. I'd calmly say, "I understand you have your own views, but I stand by mine." I started taking better care of myself, dressing neatly when I went out, sticking to a regular routine, swimming once a week. Not to prove a point, but because I wanted to live with purpose again. One day, my son asked, "Dad, why don't you get mad like you used to?" And I said, "I don't need to argue to be respected. I just need to be myself." From that point on, I noticed something shift. My kids started listening more. Not because I raised my voice, but because I carried myself with quiet strength. Action 3. Withdraw your emotional dependence. I used to believe that if I just showed enough affection, expressed how much I missed my kids, they would respond with the same warmth. That's why I often texted things like, "How are you doing? It's been a while. Why haven't you called your dad?" And when I didn't get a reply, I'd call instead. But the more I did that, the more distant they seemed to become. Eventually, I realized I was doing something I used to hate when I was young, putting emotional pressure on them. My kids are busy, they have their own lives, and even though I'm their father, that doesn't mean I should expect to be the emotional center of their world. So I decided to change. I stopped waiting for a call every evening. I stopped repeating, "I miss you so much." Instead, I started learning how to play the ukulele. I joined a morning walking group. Every Wednesday, I go to the community center to play chess with a few old friends. And something amazing happened. My daughter started calling more often. She asked, "Dad, do you have any plans this week?" I smiled and said, "Of course, I've got a full schedule." I didn't need to explain further, but I could tell. She was starting to see me differently. Not as a lonely old man waiting for attention, but as an independent man living his own life. After all these years, I've learned that when we create a fulfilling life for ourselves, our children stop seeing us as a burden and start seeing us as role models. Live with joy, not to get their attention, but because you deserve happiness for yourself. Action 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. In the past, whenever my son said something rude or out of line, I'd just force a smile or stay quiet. I didn't want to create tension. I was afraid he might get upset. But what I didn't realize was that my silence was teaching him something dangerous, that his behavior was acceptable. Then one day, he openly challenged my opinion in front of my grandchild, raising his voice. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I looked him in the eye and calmly said, "You have every right to disagree, but no one has the right to disrespect me. If you speak to me like that again, I will walk away from this table." He was caught off guard, surprised, even a little embarrassed. But I wasn't angry. I spoke clearly, directly, and without raising my voice. And from that day on, his tone began to shift. No more condescending jokes, no more dismissive remarks. Instead, there was restraint and respect. I've come to understand that our children will only respect us if we respect ourselves enough to set boundaries, and more importantly, to defend them. If you don't speak up about what's unacceptable, you can't be surprised when others cross the line. Action 5. Stop giving when it's no longer appreciated. I used to think being a good father meant always being available to help. If my kids needed money, I transferred it right away. If they needed someone to watch the grandkids, I dropped everything to be there. When my daughter-in-law called for help fixing the fence, I canceled my doctor's appointment to come over. I did it all without complaint. But what I got in return wasn't gratitude. Over time, I noticed the thank yous started to disappear. In their place were expectations. My son once said bluntly, "If you don't help us, who will?" That hurt deeply. Not just because of the words, but because I realized I had taught him to think that way, by always giving without limits. So I made a change. I didn't cut them off, but I changed how I gave. I stopped offering help before they even asked. I no longer said yes immediately. Instead, I took time to consider. I started saying no when I felt exhausted, or when it meant sacrificing something important to me. At first, they didn't like it. They were surprised, maybe even annoyed. But slowly, things shifted. They started asking more respectfully. They began to value my time. One day, my daughter called and said, "Dad, if you're not too busy this week." It may sound small, but that one sentence meant a lot. It meant something had changed. I share this not to complain, but to tell you, if you're watching this right now, that kindness only has value when it's paired with self-awareness. If you keep giving endlessly without requiring respect in return, the only message you're sending is that your kindness doesn't need to be respected at all. Action 6. Build a life that doesn't revolve around your children. There was a time when my whole life revolved around my kids. Every morning, I'd wake up hoping for a text from them. If a week passed without a call, I'd feel empty. I turned down invites from friends just in case one of the kids needed me. But the truth is, I had slowly lost myself without realizing it. Then one day, I saw a message on my son's phone that he had sent to his sister. It said, "Dad keeps calling lately. It's starting to feel like pressure." That hit me hard. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be the emotional weight my kids had to carry. That was the moment I knew it was time to live my own life. I started learning how to paint. I joined a senior yoga class in the park. I signed up for a group travel program for retirees, the first trip I'd ever taken without kids or grandkids. I began journaling again, reading every evening, and even tried a bit of gardening, even though my joints didn't always cooperate. At first, my kids were shocked. "Where are you going, Dad? Aren't you watching the grandkids today?" But soon things changed. They started showing genuine interest in my life. My son even said, "Dad, you've got a busier schedule than I do." And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as someone waiting around, but as someone to be proud of. You see, when you stop living your life solely around your children, you don't lose love. You reclaim yourself. And only when you live for yourself can you truly love others without clinging, without expectations. Ask yourself honestly, If your kids didn't call today, would your day still feel meaningful? If the answer is, I'm not sure, maybe it's time to start living for you. Final thoughts. If you're still here with me, watching this until the end, chances are you felt the same pain I have. That feeling when your children no longer seem to value you the way they once did. But here's what I've learned. We are not powerless. We don't need to demand respect with words. We earn it through how we live. I've come to understand that when you begin to love yourself, set clear boundaries, build a full and independent life, and stop depending on anyone else for your worth, your children will start to see you in a new light. No longer as someone who needs help, but as someone who is strong, wise, and worthy of deep respect. If my story resonates with you, if you saw yourself in anything I said, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. And if you found this video helpful, please like, share it with others in our generation, and subscribe to this channel so we can walk this journey together toward a life of dignity, strength, and joy in our later years. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope to see you again in the next meaningful video.